participants as well as the interpreters. So multiple participants speaking simultaneously will make it difficult for the speakers. So kindly take care of those things. So this is the instruction for today's how to Zoom guidelines. And today we will move on to the session. Uh, Today the topic of the session is once again on behalf of HRF, I welcome you all for this wonderful session of 16 days activism. The topic of the session is technological determinism. Uh, Today we have a moderator, Mahira Himam from Bharatdasan University, who is an MPhil scholar. So I welcome you, Mahira, to take over the session. Thank you.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to moderate this session. As this is my the first session, so I'm little nervous. So please do forgive me if I get fumble or if I get stuck anywhere. So on this, I'll start now. I would like to introduce our eminent speaker, Dr. Usha Ramanathan. Dr. Usha Ramanathan is an independent legal researcher. Her research interests include human rights, displacement, torts, and environment. She has devoted her attention to several specific issues such as the Bhopal gas disaster, the Narmada Valley dams, and slum evictions in Delhi. She is one of the leading critics of Aadhaar. She is a research fellow at the Center for the Study of Developing Societies. She teaches environmental law, labor law, and consumer law at the Indian Law Institute and is a regular guest professor in many universities around the world. She is a frequent advisor to non-governmental organizations and international organizations. She is, for instance, a member of Amnesty International Advisory Panel on Economics, Social and Cultural Rights. She has been called upon by the World Health Organization as an expert on mental health on various occasions. She is also the South Asia editor of the Law, Environment and Development Journal. She has been tracking and engaging with the UID project and has been debated and written extensively on the issue of technology and human condition of freedom and liberty over the years. She was a member of the expert group on privacy set up in the Planning Commission of India, which gave its report on October 2012. Access Now organization gave her Human Rights Hero Award in 2018 for tireless efforts to highlighting the issue related to Aadhaar. So with this, I will stop here, and now, ma'am, you can take over.
Thank you, Mahira. I will first start with having to say this, that for no fault of yours, Mahira, you've done me a great favor, because the last part of your introduction of me is actually like 20 years old. I have grown to be an old woman, and it's very useful that you did that. That's why very often I don't necessarily correct it in advance, because this is one way of understanding how technology is in our midst. Because something that is on Google becomes the truth, never mind what we are, right? So it's actually very useful, therefore, to explain that the way in which technology is reconstructing us and reconstituting us is something that has been happening over the past 15, 20 years, and we need to be aware of what it means. But that's just by way of introduction to say that, you know, we need to have a healthy skepticism of what technology means to us and how much and in what ways we can rely on technology. I have one request, Mahira, that you don't switch off your camera, because it's useful for me to have, it's very nice to speak to a person. I mean, if we were all sitting in one room together, I would be talking to everybody. But because of the limitations of broadband and the rest of it, if everybody gets on the camera, it might be difficult. But I'm cautioning you therefore, Mahira, that my conversation is through you. So I'm looking at you while I speak. Yeah.
Sure, ma'am. Sure.
And there are a few others now. So that's also helpful. It'll help you, I think, to get away from feeling watched all the time. So this idea of technological determinism is actually something that as a people, we need to understand. And as women, we certainly need to understand, because it is having impact on us in ways which we don't necessarily recognize. If you think back, we'll find that in the past about 10, 15 years, there are certain, and at this point, I'm only talking about the idea of information and communication technologies, which includes the mobile phone, which includes the internet, and it also includes, and the other kind of technologies that I will focus on, and it includes social media and all the rest of it. And the other kind of technology which I'll focus on is the idea of identity and database, and the kind of things that that does. So artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, what do all these things mean? Cryptocurrency, blockchain, these are all things that have come in our midst, some of which we have adopted without really thinking too much about it, or actually getting excited about having it. For instance, the mobile phone. When the mobile phone first came, some of you are actually will perhaps be of a generation where you don't remember, remember life before the mobile phone. But it's actually not all that long ago. So for many of us, we've lived all our lives without it. And so you can make out the difference between what was and what is. And one of the most interesting things about the mobile phone is the easy way in which everybody clambered on, jumped onto the bandwagon of having mobile phones. A person without them, when it began, it was like an exciting toy. And then after some time, you find that very soon, it doesn't take very long, every person begins to have a mobile phone, which is just theirs. And of course, many people have 2 and some have 3 and what have you. So it is very important to remember that there are some phenomena that we need to recognize. It's important to recognize that. One thing is that with these new technologies coming in, the idea of sharing and of individual ownership has changed dramatically. If there used to be one telephone in a house, today every person in a house has a telephone. If there used to be public telephones which anybody could go in there and use, you'd find it at every street corner. Today you don't have it at all, because every person is expected to have this telephone, and almost everybody has it. If it's not a smartphone, it's a basic phone. Almost everybody has some access to some kind of mobile phone. So even people who may hesitate to spend on something else, people who don't have the wherewithal, who are not wealthy enough to be able to be sure that they can keep on paying those bills on the mobile phone, even they keep the mobile phone. It's become like an indispensable part of life. So it is important to remember that one of the characteristics of this mobile phone is easy adoption and everybody picking it up without really thinking about why we are doing it. And the second thing is that this has created individual spaces, that every individual can be identified by their mobile phone. When the mobile phone first came in, it was about convenience of having this phone, of being able to go wherever you wanted and keeping it with you. Very quickly, you find that it moves on from there to becoming something much bigger, where everything about us is in that mobile phone. Things that are not there anywhere else are also in that mobile phone. So the idea of, what do you think? What did I think about something? I'll quickly note it down on the mobile phone, and then it'll remain there. I may forget it. I may even forget that I have it on that mobile phone, but it will be there for whoever is able to access it. You get onto Facebook, you write something, you forget about it, maybe you delete it, but it stays in the system somewhere. So all these individual oriented, mobile phone is the classic case. And then if you apply that same principle to multiple tools of technology that have come in this past 10, 15 years, we find that we have been recategorized as an individual who can be identified as an individual by these various artifacts, various tools. So at this point, I just want to pause to say that technology in the beginning was intended, or we thought it was going to be a tool for us, a tool which we can use for whatever uses that we have for it. Just think about, carry this thought in your mind that over this period of time, over the past 10 years especially, technology is no longer the tool. We are the tool, and technology is the master. Technology is the controller of what is happening in our lives. So just carry the thought in your mind, and then we can discuss it if you feel that you would want to. So what I'll do at this point is give us some, there are women have been a very, as a political category, we are a very interesting set of people. We are about half the population. Of course, we depleted to much less than half for a while in India, at least. And then we've been trying to find our way back to becoming closer to half. It'll take a long time and a lot of change of cultural practices and thinking before we get there. But we are about, roughly speaking, we are about half the population. In most institutions, we are not there in decision-making positions, in most institutions. And where women do exist, it's almost like tokenism. It hasn't expanded in any way. So today we have a finance minister who's a woman, and we are told, see, you have a finance minister who's a woman. And then you look around and you find all she has to do is to keep coming and telling us, oh, everything is fine. GDP is great. So it's like, the job of soothing people who are riled up because the economy is down. That's the job of the woman. I don't know, you may remember when Obama was elected president and George Bush had been there just before him for 2 terms. Everyone was saying what a mess George Bush had made. And they said, this is classic racism. And where you have a black man has to come and clean up the mess that a white man leaves behind. So in a sense, the woman is kind of put in that position here too, although very differently in terms of caste or religion, because that's another 2 huge burdens that we carry with us in this country of the idea of the minority and the idea of caste and oppression. And the other category, of course, that we know is as being women. It's actually the fascinating thing about the women's position in all of this is that women are often the excuse for making many changes, which are repressive changes. They are not necessarily progressive changes at all. So if I were to give one illustration from some time ago, you take something like the onus of proof. In rape cases, you have this idea that an accused should not have to prove that they are innocent. The prosecution has to prove that the accused person is guilty. But because of the difficulties that women have had in this, because it's so difficult to come across any of this, one good principle that came in was that you are not going to disbelieve the woman when she says that she's been raped. So you will start not from being skeptical, but you will start from believing, which means that the investigation will go on the basis that what she's saying is correct. Now that would have been a very good route to go, but it went one step further and they said, don't worry, we will make the accused have to answer and explain how he is innocent. Now, whether it's helped women or not, it has helped change state and legal policy. So you had TADA, you had POTA, and you just said, the burden of proof has shifted to the accused because it was done in the case of women. It becomes very easy to explain it, saying that this is a new principle. When the question of violence and of rape and murder came up, the state said, oh, don't worry, we will hang the person. We may be completely opposed to the death penalty, but you'll say, we'll hang the person. Like that's going to solve our problem. So it is important for us to remember that very often when changes are promised to us, it is important at every stage to analyze and assess whether they are pro-people and even pro-us, and whether we agree with the politics, with the political space that that creates or not. Everything that is offered as a solution is not always a solution. Very often, solutions become the problem. In technology, we have seen that happen quite a lot. So I'll just tell you two brief things about an earlier phase in technology so that we understand what is happening with this thing called technology now. In the late 1990s, there was a, as 2000 was drawing near, and by about from the 60s, there had been some computerization that had been going on. So things like banks, power stations, travel, especially airlines, all these had started computerizing. So when the process of computerization started, everything started getting done through the computer. As 2000 was drawing near, suddenly there was panic. They said, in the 60s, when we put when we set our computer systems in place, the date that we had, the date that you have at the right-hand bottom of your computer, they said that the date that we have, we had said, for instance, if it's 1st December 1989, they would say 1/12 or 01/12 89, not 1989. So it became 1989, 90, 91, and then as 97, 98 was coming close, they said when it becomes 2000, the computer won't know that it is 2000. It will go back to 1900. So all the calculation that you've put in your banking system, in your nuclear power stations, in your, in your airline system, they could collapse. And it will be like a crashing of every system because you've computerized everything now. There is nothing outside of it. So what they did was they said, we therefore need now to clean up all of this and we need to change. Every system has to be updated and the date has to be changed to 1997, 1998, whatever the year was. It's important as Indians for us to know that our companies like Infosys and the rest of them made their money on this. They went and their job was to go, they became, as rich as they are. We know that the richest people in this country today, many among them are from the tech world. Among the richest companies are within these technology companies. So their first big tranche of money was made on changing the date in the system. Why I'm saying this is partly because we need to know how much ability there is. Because when we think that our technology companies have done brilliant work and they are in great places, we need to know what that brilliant thing was. And it's also important because in the past 10 years, every effort has been made, whether it's the Manmohan Singh government or the Modi government, to give the tech companies what they want, especially when Mr. Nilekani entered the government, to give them what they want. And we can discuss some of the details of that later, but to say that you just make this digital India so that we are emperors of the world. And they have not been able to do it. I mean, it's a good thing for us that they've not been able to do it, but we need to know that this is the kind of push, and this is the way in which our companies have developed. On the other hand, the Googles and the rest of them, the Google, for instance, came straight, they were assisted by the defense establishment in the US. They work very close with the defense establishment. When you read the papers after this, just go to that page where they have the foreign news. Every once in a while, you'll find that Google employees are having a huge problem with the company because they want to do some surveillance project for the defense establishment. And the employees are saying, no, please don't do this because we'll go on strike if you do this, because our reputation is at stake. We don't want to work in a company which has a reputation of this kind. So, and that's why it's important to know where we began. We began with this, what is called the millennium bug. As the millennium was approaching, this was the bug in the system. National Geographic, when they are writing about this, they say that actually after when 2000 came and then 2000 went, they found that actually nothing had happened. The people who had updated their computers, nothing happened. People who had not updated their computers, nothing happened. So the National Geographic says that therefore there is one strong belief. They don't say strong, I'm saying strong. There is one belief that this was perhaps a hoax and not a real problem at all. The next time you see that happen is what is called the dot-com bubble, which burst in 2002. And that's the time that, that story is too complicated for me to say now. But just this, that this dot-com, whatever.com. So a lot of commerce and a lot of the businesses, they try to conduct through this .com. So you can make everything virtual. When you make it virtual, it's going to be so much easier. And in later years, this became what is called everyone was looking for the WhatsApp moment. You come up with this great product, which nobody else has done before you. And then you get all the customers to your site. So this is that bubble burst in 2002. The programs and projects and schemes that we are seeing today are all those companies which had developed some of these, technical prowess. Those companies speaking, so it was the technology companies speaking at that time to European Union. And that is recorded, that they said, listen, you do something for us, we can do something for you. If you don't help us now, we can't survive. If the companies were not helped by the state, the companies could not survive. So they said, you help us and we will help you. How does a technology company help the state? It helps the state through surveillance, as we have seen over time. So this is the underlying contract between the state and technology companies. So let's remember that when we are asking for any kind of changes that we want, and any kind of assistance that we want, which is going to help us through the use of technology. Who controls it? Why are they doing it? What do they take in the process of doing this? This is something that, and it's, soon after this 2002, from about 2003, you start having across the world, especially the developing world, you start having e-governance projects. That is, government should start becoming e-enabled. So it'll all be electronic. And very soon, companies are telling the government, listen, you have data because people are giving you all kinds of information. You have no clue what to do with it. And we are not interested in your knowing it. We will do it. Give all that data to us. We will service you. And then there is a document. I mean, we have an Indian document which came in 2011, January, which neatly says that this is what they plan to do. Those companies are where public data is handed over to private companies so that they can service the state and then make profit for themselves. Those are called National Information Utilities in our country, NIU. And these NIUs, one NIU that you will all immediately recognize maybe is the Goods and Services Tax Network. That is the one that's giving everybody grief today. You don't know how, you can't upload it, the technology is faulty, there are, smaller people have problems, but the interest is in the data. So as women, what is the understanding that we need to bring? What is the understanding we need to go away from? But what is also the understanding that we need to bring to this kind of this kind of ambition? And what are the places where we have actually put our foot into the trap? Because we think it might be an improvement. Is it an improvement or is it not? What is it that we've battled for? What things may we need to change? And how far do we want to go in this thing of technology? So briefly first, why technological determinism? What is this technological determinism? So what has been, this e-governance idea has been premised on certain things. The first thing is all of us are corrupt. So since everyone is presumed to be corrupt, and you can never prove otherwise, because each time you encounter a system, you have to prove that you are not corrupt. So it is not as if it's a reputation that you can build up for your life. You build it up till the next transaction, that's all. So while people are corrupt, technology is incorruptible. This is one premise of technological determinism. So people are corrupt, technology is not corrupt, and therefore we should depend on technology and not on people, right? People are fallible, people make mistakes. you put 5 plus 6 and then somebody calls you for chai, you go there, you come back and you put the total as 9. People are, they can make mistakes. Technology is infallible. It doesn't make mistakes. Now we must remember that these are premises, but they are also mythologies, because none of this is necessarily true, as we'll see as we go along. The third thing is that in the context of technological determinism, when that technology is neutral, people are not neutral. So even if I'm not corrupt, I have biases. Technology is neutral. Now this has been the biggest myth of all. And I think by now this has exploded. But it still carries on. The myth keeps getting repeated, so that after a while, we don't know that it is a myth anymore. We actually internalize that this is accurate. The other thing that's come up in recent times, which is actually the deeper question in a sense, is that human intelligence is limited. Human beings don't have the kind of, we have only intelligence that is confined to, for those of us who believe in rebirth, maybe there is something you bring from your last life, but otherwise it's only what you have here. And it's one mind, one education, one bit of experience, and a little bit of reading. How much can we know? But machine learning learns from multiple sources and learns all the time. Even when you are resting, it is working. And therefore, the machine and the algorithm is smarter than the human being is. So the human being has to give what they have to the machine to produce something that is superior to human intelligence. Now, this is what artificial intelligence is about, where they are asking us to hand over anything that we have so that you can create artificial intelligence from it. So our natural intelligence is fed into either the machine, or they create algorithms to receive it. Machine learning is even more, machine learning doesn't even, when you talk about algorithmic learning, the basis is still what it has got from us. In machine learning, it may start with us and then go very much further. You don't even know where. Day after tomorrow, they'll come and say, you know what, this is what you've become, and you won't know it. So that's the kind of power of technology that we are being asked to surrender to. It's in this context, it's also important that artificial intelligence cannot be produced, cannot be created, can't come into existence without huge amounts of data. It crunches data. It's like a monster that gobbles all the data that there is. And then that data is then regurgitated and made into something else. So various profiles, various products, various uses are meant to be created through the use of this artificial intelligence. But artificial intelligence needs data. So today, when you find that in the past 10, 15 years, you've been told everything has to be digitized, it seemed a very, very innocent kind of exercise, and even efficient. If it worked well, it could be efficient. But it doesn't stop there. The next step is they say everyone get an ID. They say it's voluntary, but voluntary today is compulsory. So it's actually Oxford English Dictionary should shut down, put themselves in a museum, and allow the technology people to create a new dictionary. Because today, voluntary is mandatory. Right? So everybody has to have this ID. Now, this ID has two parts. It has biometrics and it has the number. Biometrics is entirely an experiment. And I can answer this question later. I won't go into it now. But biometrics is an experiment that has failed. It is not an experiment that has succeeded. So the other part of it is the number. So when in our country, we call it the unique ID number. Now, this is an ambition, a global ambition that they tried in multiple places. India proved to be, and we need to ponder a little bit about this, that India proved to be the place where they were able to do what they wanted. Many other places resisted. Today, Jamaica is resisting, Kenya is resisting. India just fell into it. All of us stood in queues and went and gave our fingerprints and said, please send me number. Right? So there is something that we have internalized that yes, we are corrupt. We see that now, no, demonetization, very good because rich people are having a hard time. Complete mythology. But it helps the state to do whatever it is that it wants to do, right? So in every stage of what we are doing, we have to demythify. We have to get rid of the, of the myth that is surrounding many of these ideas. Let's just take a look at, so then you come to the ID. After they've given everyone an ID, even as they are giving everyone an ID, how did they make sure that everybody went and stood in line and got an ID? They made sure by saying that if you don't have this ID number, and if you don't put that number in your bank account, for your mobile phone, for your food, for school, for scholarship, for getting married, for paying your taxes, name it. If you don't have this number and you don't put it, then either you will be denied the service or you will have to pay a penalty or maybe even go to prison. Or we will take away whatever. So for instance, for the brief period when they said in the bank account, you have to put your number. They said, if you don't put your number into your bank account by a certain date, we will freeze your account. And after that, what they do with it, they do with it. So the idea of this appropriation from the people is also part of the technique of getting everyone on board. So the next stage, therefore, is putting that number in every database. Think about each of you, what you've done, where all you put this number, and what is the purpose of all of this? I mean, yesterday, 2 days ago in Haryana, they've said that school, you can't enter a senior secondary school unless you've given your UID number. That's the only ID that they will accept. Why? We'll come to the why later, but the point is that you have to have, so it is called ubiquity, which means it should be everywhere. Once the number is in every database, then converging that data about each individual is not so difficult. So we'll come to the specific uses of this kind of data, which is going to be important. That is, this is a process of what is called leaving digital footprints. We are leaving digital footprints every place we go. And that is what is being asked. Of course, today, I'm jumping a bit, but I'll go back. Today, when they are saying that vaccination is round the corner, two things have come together. One is that they're saying everybody should have a health ID. Actually, as women, we should know that even the earlier system of the National Health Management Information System did have, they were collecting data on caste and religion. Why were they collecting? And they were digitizing all of this. Then you're adding your number to it, your UID number. What kind of information is it that they're going to get from this? And who has the right to ask for this kind of information from us? So, which actually takes me back one step to say, we have to recognize what our relationship with the state is. The state is not our protector. The state is not our Maiba. We are not, it's not only patriarchy that we wanted to throw away. We've been trying to throw away paternalism. That, I will do you good. Therefore, you come, you surrender yourself to me and I will take care of you. That's not the role of the state. The role of the state is limited. And it's the rights of the people that have to dominate. The role of the state is to ensure that all our rights are preserved intact. When the state itself becomes the one who wants to take away our rights, what are we left with? So every bit of politics that we have in how we approach the state and what we ask the state to do, we have to think about carefully, because it is not only an administrative or scheme that we are talking, administrative action or scheme that we are talking about. We are talking about political rights every time we engage with the state. So then I'll just move from this to what are the kind of things that we have been working with. I mean, what are the things that we have also in one sense contributed to, and what do we need to do with that? The first thing, of course, in my head at least, is CCTV. How many women's movements, how many women's groups have asked that we want CCTV because CCTV will make us more secure? I know my tone, I didn't want my tone to be such a giveaway. I thought I should sound neutral so that we can all but it's very hard for me to sound neutral on this. See, it is very well meant, but I'm not sure. Maybe at the end of deliberation, there will be people who will still say that that's a good, that's a good option to be with. But I don't think we've had the kind of deliberation that we needed to have in the adoption of a technology. The one thing in technology to remember is that it is relatively new. It is evolving every day. And as they evolve, they create new rules and new further technologies. So CCTV technology, which would only have been about making sure streets are safe, for instance, has now attached to it facial recognition. So either the camera that is pointing at all of us will have facial recognition built into it, or those which are taken, the reel which is taken from the pictures, images taken from the camera of the CCTV can be run through facial recognition technology, so a program, to see who are these people and to be able to identify people and locate people. So the same person was seen in a protest somewhere else, or the person was seen walking at 9:30 in the night and then walking again at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Whose business is it to know all this? What right does anyone have to ask all of this? So when we talked earlier about CCTVs, the thing was that streets were unsafe. And since there are no people on the streets who can protect, we kind of, and I'm going to say we and include myself in, because I think as a collective, we owe it to each other. But even as I'm saying that, I'll say that it's been one of the big disasters that I feel we put our foot into. Because when we said put the CCTV there, even at that time, without facial recognition technology, who would be watching at the other end? It'll be at the police station. When did we start thinking that the policeman was our best friend and will be there to, as our defender and protector? It's not like all policemen are bad, but institutionally, it answers to the state, not to us. So even with the best of people in that system, the system answers the state. The system is not answering you and me. So when we said, let's have CCTVs, I can well imagine if I had been, I can imagine a number of people around me whose fathers would go to the nearest police station and say, Meri beti ja rahi hai and she's point irukanga engyo avangala paathe enakku ipo adu enga poranga enakku theriyano, and all these paternal fellows and patriarchal fellows sitting there together and watching where the girl goes. What were we thinking? That when somebody is watching us all the time, it's a good thing? So that's one area that I think we need to pull back and do some analysis, because what is on that, it's fascinating because every time there is, something goes wrong and the state may be answerable, the policeman. 2 days ago, you would have seen that there was an order from the Supreme Court saying that there should be CCTVs in every police station and every lockup. And people who are contesting it were saying, what is the point of having it? It's as if torture happens only inside the police station. It happens in multiple other sites. In fact, there are special rooms that are held as investigation rooms, which are not part of the acknowledged establishment at all. So what are we doing with this? It basically means 24/7, a person who's been arrested and put in a lockup will be watched all the time. It's not the policeman who's being watched. It is actually the person who's being kept in the lockup who's being watched. So this idea of watching, the state as someone watching us all the time, is something that we may need to build into our imagination. And we may have to learn how to deal with this. The other form of technological determinism is not really about, not just about this kind of technology, e-technology electronics that we are talking about, but it has a very strong role to play in this. And that is DNA. DNA is the other place, where it's basically treated as if once you have DNA evidence, you don't need anything else. And, DNA is infallible. Same thing that you say to technology. It is infallible, it's unbiased, and it will tell you the truth. So you can discover the truth through DNA. This is a complete misconception. So I think we really need to sit back and think, do a little investigation in this. First of all, that DNA is, that no two people have the same DNA. It can never match. That's not true. I mean, it is like it is still a game of probability. It's just that it is less probable when it is DNA that you'll have another match than if you were to use fingerprints, for instance, or to use iris. But it is not something, nothing has proved it so far. You know, the databases that you've had so far are only know so much. So the presumption that you look at any reasonable text on this, on DNA, and they'll tell you that it is a probabilistic science. It's not determinative. So even if it is 1 out of 1 million who may have the same kind of DNA, there are no guarantees. So which is why people like me would always say that you can use DNA evidence, but it has to be corroborated by other evidence. DNA evidence cannot stand on its own. For conviction, in the US, you had this fascinating movement called the Innocence Project. What happened there was that typically large numbers of blacks would be picked up whenever there is a crime, especially when there is a violent crime, and they would be picked up and put away, and they will be convicted. So in the 90s, early 90s, there were people inside the prison system who started, especially blacks in the system, who were proclaiming their innocence. So this was the start of a project where 2 professors got together and said, okay, let's investigate one of these. And when they investigated, they found that it was a case of rape and murder, but the person's DNA was not found. The accused person's DNA was not found on the site. And the thing about rape and murder is that if you don't have the DNA there, then it cannot be you. If you have the DNA there, it doesn't mean it needs to be you. Because, and one of the things that recently I heard was how the technology is improving so much that if I drop my DNA here and go away, 6 months later, someone picking it up from here could see it as fresh. It's very difficult to date it because the technology is improving so much in being able to pick up the DNA. But there are many other things that you have to determine. The second problem with DNA is that there can be contamination. The third is a problem that we particularly here really need to worry about, which is that you can have planting of DNA. If you look at many of the cases where in criminal law where death sentences have been given, or if you read the evidence, you feel like it's just not sufficient, but for a conviction, but there is conviction, you will find that in many of those cases, it will start with the police not refusing to even register an FIR. And then there will be an outcry. Then people from that area will go and there will be a protest outside the police station. Then it will become a cause célèbre in that area. Then they will start the investigation, by which time they have to find somebody who is responsible for it. The temptations in this kind of technological determinism is huge, to pick up a DNA and put it in that site and say it was found there. So we need to be really careful, because in our criminal justice system, our investigation mechanisms, methods are so faulty that you will find hardly any cases where it's because of the way investigation got conducted that a conviction was arrived at. Hardly ever. There will be multiple slips that will occur all along the way. And then we have already attributed guilt to the person. And then we say this is the person who's done it in so many of the cases. So we need to be careful, because I think it's part of the women's politics that it is not like we want to punish somebody for a crime. We want to prevent crime, which means we have to find the person who committed the crime. So these shortcuts can happen through technological determinism. And DNA is one of those methods. The other thing in the criminal law is something called the CCTNS. That's the crime and criminal CCTNS. Brinda, you remember what it is? Crime and criminal, something tracking network. Crime and criminal tracking network systems. So what they've done is they've said all the police stations around the country have to be linked up. So they started with 14,000 police stations around the country. And then they went on to increase it to other places. And every FIR will be, as of now, they haven't progressed very far, but the idea is that they'll be able to keep track of people moving around the country. It means that the criminal justice system is going to be used for keeping track of people. tracking network systems, right? So now this CCTNS is a system that has been given to enable the police to be able to work together, which is per se not a bad thing. I mean, police do need to be able to work together. And if that will help in bringing down problems of jurisdiction, the one time it was done was after tsunami in 2004, 4, right. So when tsunami happened, there were people who had come from multiple places because it was the 26th of December. People had come to Velangani for Christmas. People, they just got washed away, and you didn't know where you had to find. When relatives came trying to find out what had happened and where their families were, they didn't know where they had to register the FIR. Because in criminal law, this where you register the FIR becomes a big thing in terms of jurisdiction. And they simplified it. It was very well done at that time in near Nagarkoil, where they got together, where the police generally, there was an instruction given saying that people should be able to register the FIR anywhere. Don't ask them to go to this or that police station. You can pass it on amongst yourselves, but allow them to register it anywhere. Now the CCTNS, to the extent that it allows for this kind of simplification of jurisdiction, it is excellent. The problem is that FIRs are not innocent documents. Today, you know that love jihad thing is going on. Every person who wants to get married is going to have an FIR against them. And then that FIR becomes the first thing that people look at. So why does it matter what the CCTNS says? What does it matter who has access to it? Because you have businesses that are being built up today on profiling each person. So they'll say, you give me maybe the UID number, Aadhaar number, and I will then find out in public databases where all they can be found. Because now every database is going to contain that Aadhaar number. That UID number will be part of that FIR. And so we will track people, we'll profile them, and we'll hand that profile maybe to a prospective employer, maybe to a prospective person who wants his son or daughter to get married. Heaven knows what, it can go to just about anybody. So these idea of public databases of this nature, which can have such implications for people, that is something that we need to be looking at carefully, because we will be contributing to those. And the explanation that they give very often is that women need it. So we have to analyze and see whether we need it, and even if we need it, whether we want it. They are two different things. And who we feel controls this. The next thing that I thought we'll just look at, because this is the other major shift. All of us have seen it happening around us, but I'm not sure. I mean, I know that I have partial understanding of this. I'm not sure how many have a full understanding of what this is. This is to stoke that discussion. See, one of the major changes that has happened in the past 20 years is in the past 15 years, past 10 years, and even more in the past 5 years, is this business of cashless economy. Question is, what do we think a cashless economy is? So before I say that, I'll just go back a bit and think about something like self-help groups. Self-help groups were made consisting of women, usually about 10 to each group. It can be larger, it can be smaller. These self-help groups would then, they were constituted to provide strength among women. But they also became the target point for many people who wanted to do safe business. So if you take microfinance and you look at what microfinance was about, they said, we will lend money to self-help groups. Why not to an individual? In everything else, you're making us into individuals. Why only in this do you want us to be a collective? Because first of all, they found that women are more hesitant to default on paying back. Second thing is that if the individual can't do it, other women will then have to get money together and pay back. And they found women to be, on the one hand, it's the grand charitable gesture of giving money in women's hands. On the other, the reason that they're willing to give it is because they can make a profit by they'll be sure of getting their money back. And if you don't get it back, if every person doesn't pay back, the group anyway will make sure that the money is paid back. So this is the skeptical part This is a skeptical me speaking about microfinance. And we have seen that there were scams around microfinance because banks were willing. See, this is the other thing, we have to link up a lot of things when we think of this. I know I'm missing many things, but I'll tell you the things that I have not missed. So one of those things is this, after 1991, and we're seeing that again now, so we need to recognize it. After 1991 and, liberalization, privatization, all of this becoming the norm, the idea that banks should be privatized was very much on the anvil. So we had nationalization of banks in the 60s, and we were going to have privatization of banks after 91. And since they had decided that they were going to privatize the banks, for 15 years, and you can talk to the public sector bankers, which is where I heard this, for about 15 years, there was no recruitment done in banks at all. So when you don't recruit anybody in the banking system, because they thought they're going to privatize and you can't have, the less heavy it is with workforce, the easier it will be for the privatization process. But in 15 years' time, they realized that it's not going to happen now. So there were recruitments that were done again. Now the NPAs, which all of us keep hearing, non-performing assets of the banks that we keep hearing about. Now these NPAs, part of the reason that they have happened the way they've happened is because since these banks did not have enough staff, the banks could not lend to the small creditor, debtor. They couldn't give credit to the small person. They could only give large amounts to big companies because giving it to so many small agencies required much more bank task force, which they didn't have. And that's the time that microfinance comes in and says, we will fill this gap for you. So banks were giving money to microfinance to give to women who would definitely return. This is the kind of, and then you have multiple things happening. Now you have, after these technologies have come in, they're saying, see, they want the data. They want to know who you are, how much you spend, where do you spend it, how often do you spend, where do you go, do you travel, what kind of things do you, if you buy a ticket every day from Nellore to Guntur, then they know that this is the kind of route that you travel and you're doing it all the time. So the building up of the profile and making sense of digital footprints becomes part of the exercise when you are able to transfer this whole thing, even from microfinance, into the digital system. Now, the digital system is sold to us as being a convenient system. The digital system is where we leave our footprints. Now, why is it that they want our footprints? They say we want, now, when self-help groups are given money by the microfinance people, the interest rate varies between 20 and 24% overall. They're saying we can do it at almost no risk and at a very low rate of interest because we know who we are lending to and we can see their every transaction. And they've brought in systems like what is called payday. I don't know if you've seen these. If you just look for the payday, yeah. So you'll find that they say that when your pay comes into your account, the first charge on that will be returning money to the person who gave you credit. This is possible because they control it through technology. You don't have to give a check. There is no prepaid. There's nothing. It's just an instruction. So today there is no consent. There is only a consent architecture. And that consent architecture is managed by an account aggregator. So they've completely changed everything. Now, what is significant in this is the kind of language that has come with it. The language is of cashless, which all of us have heard. It'll be cashless, it's very convenient. What does cashless mean? It means that there is no anonymous spending. Anything that you spend on will be known, and it can only be on the base through a system that is a commercial system. That's the only way you're ever going to be able to spend. Then you have paperless. So the three things that they tell us is that first, it will be cashless. Second, it will be paperless. So according to them, they are protecting all the forests in our world. So this, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be so cynical, but the second part is paperless. But like any RTI person will tell you, if you don't have paper, you have no trace. So one of the very interesting things that happened during when the PDS was being converted and it was being made dependent on the UID, what they did was they would give in, very often they would not get the receipt for having put their fingerprint and having got their rations. Similarly, when you go to a banking correspondent and they would put their fingerprint and collect their money, sometimes they would get receipts. But those receipts, you see, these are the experimental phases, right? Those receipts would be issued with facsimile kind of technology in it, which means that after a little while, it vanishes. It evaporates. So this is the disappearing information under the RTI. So it doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, what are you going to give? This is the second. The third, which also means that you have no track of what is happening with you. Some money is put in, they'll say, something has come from for the gas, something else has come for PD. You don't know what is what, you don't know whether it's come or not. And in a little bit, I'll just tell you why that has become so important, knowing or not knowing. The third is presenceless. This is actually the most diabolical. So the promise is of cashless, paperless, and presenceless, saying that, listen, you don't need to be present. You just need to make sure that you can be identified through the technological system. This is technological determinism. I don't need to see your face. You exist if the technology is able to establish that you exist. So it may be by a fingerprint, it may be by facial recognition. So when it came to facial recognition, and they said that, okay, fingerprint not working, iris not taking off. So we'll put a camera and take a picture. They said, and we can do facial recognition through that. Then they said, no, that's not enough, because we have to be sure that the person is alive. You can't just put, you could put a picture there, then what do you do? So you have to, I don't know, maybe twiddle your ears or whatever, to show that you're alive at the time that is being taken. So, this kind of, if it were not real and happening in the world around us, it would actually be a great source of humor. Unfortunately, this is happening, all around us now. And so we can't take it as lightly as I would love to. So this idea of presenceless, paperless, and cashless has already we can see that every one of these has started collapsing. I don't know how many of you saw the Indian Express. I know Indian Express doesn't come in the South, but if you can just go back, I can also send some of the links if you want. And from the 31st of October, they have been front paging a story of how minority scholarships have been completely, scammed because it's school scholarships. So there is a separate scholarship if a person is a hostelite, and a separate, a lesser one if you don't stay in the hostel. You get Indian Express. I thought you get New Indian Express. I'm not sure they carried it. I think it was. Anyway, if you get it, it's a good thing, because this, and in any case, I'll just send you at least some of the links. So from the 31st, every day they were front paging the story, because they found Indian Express got, somebody told them that, listen, this whole thing is a complete sham. So will you please investigate it? When they picked up 15 schools in Jharkhand, and they looked at those 15 schools. So it is possible now just on the database to be able to bring it down to the school and to the student. Everything is available on the net, and the Finance Ministry's website has all of this. So it is possible to do. Just remember that this was not a government initiative to investigate this. This was done by a newspaper. And they found that a collusion of some middlemen, banking correspondent, and headmasters of schools. In many schools, they didn't even know what it was. They didn't even, the headmaster didn't even know it was happening. Students didn't know that, they were entitled to money which they were not getting. Some people who had minority names, so if they were Muslim names, it helped. So they would go to them and say, some money is being sent to you from Saudi Arabia or Dubai, I forget which. So I just need all your information. And then open an account in their name. The money gets transferred to that. The person to whom the money has been transferred gets half. The middleman comes and takes the other half and walks away. Day after day, they told us the story. It's now been referred to the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI. There are cases that have been filed against people who are who are being charged under this. It's a clear demonstration that this system, which was supposed to be clear about identity, you can't make any kind of identity issue on this. It was supposed to stop leakage. It was supposed to stop corruption. It was supposed to stop the diversion of money into hands, none of it has worked. But the system will not die. Why? Because we haven't realized and we are not asking for it. So they'll continue with it till we realize that this is affecting everybody actually. Earlier, we saw that there were, it used to happen very often in public hearings in Delhi, where you'll have people coming and saying, I went to the bank, an old woman will come there, she's entitled to social security pension. And then she'll come there and say, I went to my bank, I asked them, they said, no, your money has already been taken away. And she says, I never took that money. Nobody knows where all these things are going. So this idea that people who are, who have a disability, people who are old, women, who lost their husbands, various categories of people who are entitled to social security pension, they are being asked to give their UID number, to give their fingerprint, to put their number in the bank database, to do all of that. But there is no reciprocal responsibility that has been taken. It's really significant. And so what we are finding is that a large number of people don't know what they are entitled to, don't know what has come, and therefore are finding themselves completely without any knowledge about either having got or not got. It's become the easiest way by which corruption and scams can be done. So despite, and every day, even today's paper has something again. Somebody has gone to the court and filed a petition in the Allahabad High Court saying, don't allow this to be taken over by just the CBI or someone. The court should monitor it. It's like an everyday thing in the paper. And yet you don't see that there has been anything done either by the finance ministry or by anybody else to launch an investigation into the general, how this money is moving. So the idea of presenceless is about making all of us redundant to the system. Money needs to move from one place to another. Data needs to move from one place. Can you imagine if they are making algorithms based on this data, what are they going to get? They'll say money moved from somewhere to somewhere, 5,700 rupees was taken out at one time. What sense will they make of this? So this is actually what technology is doing is it's saying, it's fascinating. There is a word that has come in now. It's being used in other contexts before, but in administration, it's coming in a big way now. It's called disintermediation. So you see these IAS and Tahsildars and who have you, they are all intermediaries between the state and the people. After technology has come in, now there was about 2-3 years ago, there was a Niti Aayog paper, I think in around 2015-16, there was a Niti Aayog paper saying for 3 years, what are we thinking should happen in administration? In that they say that, if the administrator meets the people, then there is a possibility of corruption. Things won't go right. So you're going to disintermediate. The administrator will sit behind, a computer screen like this and look at the data, look at whatever has been put onto that database and make their decisions accordingly. That way, through technology, how can you be corrupt? So they are drawing back. When we say the state is pulling back, the state is pulling back from people being able to meet them. How many of you have had this experience that, something goes wrong and you call and there is the call center or whatever, that automated information is given to you saying, instructions given saying, dial 1 if you want something, dial 2, then you keep on doing this and the end of it, you just die of frustration and life ends. Now here they are talking about the state becoming such an entity where the state has a wall of a computer between the people and those who are the state. This is disintermediation, and this is being done because technology will determine what that relationship will be. So just think about, I'm just saying these are all actually mind-boggling things, at least to me. There is another element in this. Let me just check the time. There is one other element that I'll just mention now. This, there is a person who is one of the founders of the web. It's not all that long back, so he's alive and thriving and working in different places. So now he has something which is actually quite fascinating. He says that in this period, in the past 30 years, we've all migrated to computers and to technology. And the way in which we do our record keeping is all on the web. And every so often, the generation of technology is shifting. You used to have floppy disks before. Now there are no floppy disks. On film, you used to have those VHS, whatever. Now you don't have any of that. That has migrated onto something else. Then it went to some flash drive, and then it went to something else. So it keeps on changing, right? Now he says that, once the technology changes, it's very difficult to retrieve what is in the earlier technologies. To get what is on a floppy disk is very difficult today. So what happens then is that we lose history. So he actually says that we may have a 40, 50, 60-year vacuum in history. Now, up to that point, I will see it with him. Then I find that he's actually joined Google. So he's saying that, Google could now create a museum of all these artifacts so that you can revive it and produce history. So all of history will be controlled by Google. I'm not sure I'm happy at all with that. But the idea that this is what will happen to all our histories is something that we need to be aware of. There is no history if technology doesn't speak it. I can't think of anything that's more in terms of technological determinism than this. So that's another thing to consider. There is one other thing which is so bizarre that I kept it for the last. And that it may not be the last, but anyway, almost the last. There is an institute that has, you Google it and you'll find it. It's called the Institute of Human Obsolescence. Obsolescence meaning that we become obsolete. We're no longer relevant. And actually, when you think about the world around us, we know that many technologies have made many people irrelevant. We know that, especially working classes, we've seen systematically, and if it's not making the people irrelevant, it will make what they do irrelevant. So weavers, we've seen this, arts, crafts, various kinds of, herbal medicine. In fact, if I can just take 1 second off to say an aside, recently I was reading how did all these other, allopathy is the main dominant system and everything else is alternative medicine. But allopathy came in very late. It came in much after all these other systems. So they were saying that Rockefeller had a huge interest in oil, right? And he found that oil is is a solid base for allopathy. So it's a way of branding and pushing the thing up. So it's Rockefeller's branding which made allopathy the main thing and everything else is alternative. So the mainstream becomes something that is introduced, never mind what the problems with it, that has to be what we have to accept and adopt. So just, it's not about whether it's good, bad, and I'm not on that, but on how we are trained to think about things. So I'll go back to Institute for Human Obsolescence, but I know I forgot this from before, so let me just say this. So the other way in which, this national health idea was saying, the next part of it was to say that now we are talking about vaccination, right? So vaccination everywhere, everyone must have a health ID. And Mr. Gates, who's become, the plenipotentiary, he's like in every government, he has a special space. In our government, in all the African governments, everywhere he has a special space. And his prescription is that all 7 billion, first we're not sure what the virus does. We don't know what the vaccine will do. We don't know who is going to need the vaccine. We don't know how many times you will need it. We don't know if it's going to be a repeat every year or once is enough. We don't know whether a person who's had COVID will need the vaccine or not. Basically, we know nothing. Scientists may know. Mr. Gates is not a scientist. So he stands there and says, even before the vaccine had progressed at all, he's already standing there and saying that 7 point whatever billion people there are in the world today must all take this vaccination. This vaccine has to go into every person. And every person must have with them a digital certificate that they have been vaccinated. Think about what this means in terms of control that they are looking at. First thing is they put something into your body that we know nothing about. And I have to clarify here, I've taken my vaccinations and I think some of them have been very helpful. So it's not about being anti-vaccine. It's about saying that it's a very important process that you have to follow before you can arrive at a decision about it. That's all. And now you're telling us that everyone should have it, and you can only move out of your house if you're going to have that vaccination. So this has brought in a paradigm which we are seeing around us all the time, where they say, all these whiles, now technology has made us all individuals. It's kind of broken us up into individual parts. Human rights was also saying that you had individual rights. Even if all of the rest of the community doesn't agree with what you want, you have a right to be different. Our whole, this fight against criminalization of homosexuality has to do with this. Not just that it is natural, but that every person has a right of self-determination about who they are. Now, all of that comes into question when you have something being determined by technology and you have to conform to that technology and the requirements of it. You are a suspect if you don't conform to the way you're supposed to look. So when you start, it's making people uniform. So the idea, and so one of the things in this human rights thing is it's about individual rights, but they are now saying that you have to do whatever we tell you to do because of other people's fundamental rights. Now, I actually think it's important to respect other people's rights. But if it can only be done through negating one's own rights and saying there are no personal rights, there is only giving up of rights, there is no, there's no experiencing of rights, that's a very, very different thing. So think about what this paradigm means. Think also about this, that this is a country where, normally states exist so that, like I was saying a while ago, they exist so that they can protect the rights of the people. That make sure nobody violates my rights. You don't have to give me my right. Make sure nobody violates it. But today, you have a situation where our government actually went to the court and said people of this country don't have a right to privacy. It's an extraordinary statement for any government to make. And for a democratic constitutional government to go and make this statement in a court that people do not have a right to privacy is extraordinary. Actually, on the UID, on the UID project, many of us have been saying what the problem is for a long time. But actually, the Attorney General helped us. The day he went to court and said, people of this country don't have a right to privacy, in the context of the UID, everyone knew that what he was saying was either privacy should survive or the project will survive. The project cannot coexist with the right to privacy. That's what we are seeing today. Today we are being told, and one of the major tragedies, and this is something we need to think about too, is that people of this country, they may be law students, they may be lawyers, there might be public interest persons, they go to court and say, please ask, they're asking for a reduction of our rights. So one really decent human being who later said, listen, it's not like I was looking for violating the right to privacy. It's just that social media has been so bad that I wanted some way of being able to track people who, commit what is basically a crime, because they are provoking people to, to attack others and whatnot. So he went to the court and he said, link up Aadhaar number with social media profiles. So we are asking for denuding our own rights. In the women's movement, we've had to be very careful. We've made our slips, there's no doubt at all. But we have to catch ourselves and pull ourselves back, because going to the state and saying, make our rights less, I don't need to say what that means. So let's just think about what that means. Then this last thing that I'll just mention is on this Institute of Human Obsolescence. I mean, it's just so bizarre that I keep it for the last, because I can only laugh at the end of it. But it's serious business. So this is a person, it's been set up by a person who's an artist and an activist. And some basic things he says. He says, for instance, what are we all doing? Every minute of the day, we are generating data. We are working for the big monopolies, data monopolies. They're tech monopolies. So whether it's Google or Amazon or whoever, we are working for them. How, if you keep your mobile phone, suppose you do nothing, you switch off your computer, you switch off your phone, you keep it away, and you say, now I'm not working for them. Actually, you are. Because during that period, they want to know why. They know that your phone has been switched off. That's data for them. Everything that you do is data today. Have we even considered what the value of this data is for somebody else? We all heard about Cambridge Analytica. Have we thought what it is doing to us and what are the various ways in which it is being done to us? So he has this that he says, you know, we are foolish to be producing data for them for free like this. And you may not be able to stop. So he has a problem with the monopolies up to quite an extent. I mean, you'll find yourself in disagreement. After that, it's not about agreement or disagreement, but he's looking at solutions. So he says, okay, labor has to be relevant, which means that the skills that they have, what they can provide, will have to be something that the system needs. So in this changed system, what human beings can produce, which we can sell as labor to that system, is human heat, body heat. If you look at blockchain, if you look at cryptocurrency, it requires huge amounts of energy. So he says, if you look at that institute, I mean, if you look at that website, you'll find that there is this, there is this slabs on which people are lying with, tied up in something which will help in increasing the heat of the body. And then there are all these electrodes and stuff which are attached to them. This becomes the labor that's going to be produced. Just think about what is being done to human beings. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, human beings are the only ones with reason and emotion, and we should be conquering the world. Not for a moment. But think about what some human beings are doing to other human beings. The Matrix does show this. The Matrix is still innocent of the extent to which it has gone now. So, this is the new imagination. This is the new way in which we are being cast, where our relevances as human beings in the context of other human beings is being reduced and being diverted in various ways. We are being reduced to data. There is recently, if Mr. Nilekani did one bit of work here, Mr. Narayan Murthy set up the MPCI, which is another whole story, and Mr. Chris Gopalakrishnan, the three of the founders of Infosys. He has recently chaired a committee where he says that he calls it the non-personal data framework, that non-personal data should be available for them to make whatever products they want to make. And therefore, it should be freely available. What is non-personal data? It is personal data largely. There is also some other data, but it is largely about personal data. And that data, which is personal data, if it is already in the public domain. So what do? You create multiple databases where you put the information out, and then you say, oh, it's already public. There's nothing secret about this. Or if it can be anonymized. So remember that they are asking us to lose anonymity. And in place of that, they want to give us anonymization, which is a system that they'll bring in. At a time when it is already established, the de-anonymization is a very easy process, especially given that everything that we have can be converged. There is no such thing as anonymization with that. This is the imagination, and this is the imagination that we have to deal with. I'll stop with that. Mahira, will you take over?
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was indeed very informative session and very thought-provoking. You rightly mentioned that how the government is every time watching. There was a term in I have read. I am researching on technological violence against women. So I have read the US article where they said that Big Dad is watching you. So who is Big Dad? Everybody understood. So before opening the session for question and answer, I will try to summarize what ma'am has said. So ma'am has rightly mentioned various aspects of technology and technological determinism and the faulty lines in it, how this how this is affecting the women, and how this is going to affect the future generation if we will not think about it. So ma'am has started with the origin of technology and the continuous changes on the period, like the how this the 2002 changes came, the dot com era came, how the WhatsApp era and the social media came into the era, and how this technological, and how this basically the phone has become the indispensable part of our life. Then ma'am stated that how this technology was only the tool for us. Now we have become the tool of it, and how technology is using us, all of us. Then ma'am elaborated the question of women with the technology, right? Just like that we are 50% of the population, but how we are addressing this, and how this 50% are in any decision making position or not, or if we are there, then how we are dealing with this issue. And the tokenism issue ma'am dealt with, like the she has given the example of our minister, the Nirmala Sitaraman, which was rightly corrected that what she is doing is a different kind of thing. Then ma'am stated that how this government and the tech companies are together, and how they are correlating with the issue of the surveillance, because what the case of corporate industry and government and the state. So this shows that they are not the one who is going to profit us, but they are going to surveillance us in many ways, in many ways. Then she talked about the e-governance, how this e-governance started, about the algorithm issue and the ID. And then she has talked about how the ID came into it, the biometric came, the number, the unique ID number, the unique. Then she said that the biometric has collapsed because it was not done for the right of the people. Then the number, the unique number has become internalized, how if for everything you have to show the unique ID, right from your banking to your anything, right from getting admission to school to everywhere. Then she talked about how we all are leaving the digital footprints. That was the highlight, that how we all are leaving the digital footprints. If we are offline, then it does not mean we are offline, we are working, and the data are working towards it. Ma'am has rightly mentioned that the how the CCTV, the facial recognition come. Then the how the DNA is coming in the criminal justice system. Then she also talked about how the CCT and then how this discovery has not up to the mark to uplift the human being, but these all are in number of ways are determinizing and working towards surveillance, and making we all are like somebody is watching all of us. Then she rightly mentioned that how the whole era of cashless economy and the paperless economy and the presenceless is these three are making how these three making women more vulnerable to the data, and more vulnerable to the government and as a society. She has given example that how the old lady is how the old lady gone to the bank, and she felt that there was no money in her account because somebody has taken out that money. This shows that we cannot make the whole economy as a paperless and cashless, because number of population are not so much aware of the things what is technological advancement is happening around us. Ma'am has mentioned so many things, but the last thing she mentioned, that how technology is controlling every move of us. We are If we are offline, this does not mean we are offline. We all have to think about this, and we need to open our eyes to this surveillance, and we need to have a right approach to ask the question and ask the thing. So with this, I want you to ask if you have any question. If you want to ask any question, then please do unmute yourself and ask the question. If you want to write, then please write it down in the chat box. I will ask on behalf of you to the ma'am.
Mahira, somebody had, I think Niketa had made a mention of Google Arts and Culture project. Niketa, will you just say something about that?
Yes. Hi. Thank you so much for the session today. This was extremely informative. And what I meant by the Google Arts and Project is that they have been actually working. I have now been following them almost now for the past 2-3 years now. And they are going into historical archives and they are bringing out photographs, mainly photos. So they want to mainly use the photographs. And then they are also bringing out small texts or captions with the photos and digitizing them. So they have an entire website, and they also have an app which is available on Android. So you can actually just go and every day it'll give you a new suggestion of what you could watch and or what you could read about. And it's global. So it's in India they are digitizing, and most of it as and now thinking about the project itself, most of the history is actually, I mean, who has the luxury of archiving their history, right? So ultimately the history that is made is of an upper caste, upper class person with economic resources, person who had a photograph or who had the ability to dress up or have a space for a photo. So ultimately you have exactly that history, a hegemonic history, which is which is being shown, or rather which is being recreated. And in fact I had a just today there was the news of Timnit Gebru, who was terminated. Timnit Gebru, so she was just terminated today by Google, and she was on the ethics committee for AI, right? And so my question then is that, is capitalism going to find a solution? Because just the fact that Google has an ethics committee, I think it's a lot that we are asking for them to follow the recommendations of the ethics committee once it goes beyond a limit that they would like. So how do you see that working?
I was just thinking while you were talking that some time ago, comedians used to say that, if politics itself is so full of comedy, there is no room for comedians, because, it's by parodying people that you make fun, and you have fun. But if people are parodies, then what do comedians do? It's become like that about science fiction. Anything that you can think of in terms of science fiction is way beyond what is happening now. So it's actually become impossible almost to think, in like when you say Matrix, yeah, sure, Matrix, of course. But the point is that Matrix is getting beaten every day. And the thing is, in Matrix, it's still seen, the whole thing is shown like it is a unnatural kind of thing. Whereas look at all of us, what Hannah Arendt called the banality of evil. This is the banality of ordinariness. The quotidian has become this. So that's why alerting ourselves, pulling ourselves, like if you notice this, if you notice the Google Arts and Culture program, that you noticed it is the first major step. And then what do you do? How do you understand this? What do you do with it? Because we are being sold many of these ideas. We are not being told them. And there's a big difference. So I was just thinking, in sci-fi, the one question that happened when COVID broke out, and immediately they said that, people who are old and who have comorbidities will most likely die. It would have been literally in, this Jagannathan of Swarajya magazine. He had, in one of the pieces that he wrote, talked about culling people. And I think he meant it economically. I would like to believe that that's all he meant it to be. But it sounded a great deal like this kind of, the idea of culling seems to be quite strong in our And one way of looking at this, there is a 4-part series on Bill Gates, on Steve Corbett's, 4-part series on Bill Gates. The question he's just asked is, who is Bill Gates? In that, there is one place where they show you, that in the beginning of the 20th century, how many people were there in this world? And in the beginning of the 21st century, how many people there are? And there were. And the thing is that for many people, we are all redundant. There are many redundant people who are just a burden on the system. So in sci-fi, if I were to do a book on sci-fi, if I'd had the imagination a little while ago, I would have imagined all this to lead somewhere. Today, there is no room for imagination. So just, it's like when they say the mind boggles, there isn't even space to boggle. Even the boggling space has been taken away. So that's one thing I think we need to see, that, how much of these could we anticipate? We cannot live today without crystal ball. So we can't live without a crystal ball. We have to be able to see ahead. So to look ahead, see, usually often I'll ask academics, what is it that you think you do? What is it that you contribute apart from teaching? But in terms of thought, what do you contribute? The value, say somebody like Romila Thapar, why we listen to her is because she's able to bring the richness of history to explain what is happening and where we could go. What are the lessons history has taught us, right? With technology, we are actually entering a new phase. So how much we can learn from the past is limited by the breach that happened with technology coming in. But how much we can look into the future, actually, that's not so bad. We went back, some of us, and just looked at what we had anticipated in 2009 and looked at what has actually happened. And we found that we've been able to track, we could anticipate all of this. A large part of it, not all of it, a very large part of it. The reason, because actually the people who are technology controllers are not very imaginative. You read that, Sergey Brin and whatever their book, it's so pathetic. So it's not difficult to understand where minds like this will go. And that's so when they say track the money, trace the money, whatever, I say, no, just look at the people and look at where they have the ability to go and what their imagination will produce. One of the ways in which I was thinking of that recently was the Social Dilemma. They put it on Netflix. It's an interesting documentary because they have people who were working in the technology space who then, found that what they were doing was horrendous and didn't want to stay on doing that. It's not like they got out of technology. Some of them, maybe one or two did, but most of them stayed on in the broader world of technology, but not with these companies that are completely disrupting our lives. And not doing the things that they were doing when they were there. Like one of them is the person who made up this like button. It's been a disaster for human minds. It's just a like button, but it's been disastrous. So, these are in a sense, the good guys who got out and are saying, this is not the way technology should go. By the end of the film, they're asking them, so what do you think should be done? What do you think should be done about all of this? And the answers that they give tells you that, they're good guys, but their imagination is limited to putting like buttons. Because they'll say, don't accept any notifications. I mean, really, you produce a problem of this gigantic proportions, and then you say, don't accept notifications. Amazon will give you options when you order a book. Don't accept those options. Go back and look for yourself. I mean, really? So the idea of imagination is actually still with us. It is not with the technologists. We can crystal ball gaze and we can decide. So the thing is to be able to say no. And I'm in a very fortunate position, and I should, just share that with you now, that I never got myself a mobile phone. So I find today that it's a great privilege to be able to be without a phone. Because once you have it, it seems it's almost impossible to get out of it. When you don't have it, your life is fine. I do all the things that I would want to do, all the things that you do. Maybe I don't know the news this minute, I know it 10 minutes later, but it's no big deal. What's the big deal? What is it that we think is happening to us? So I think many of us need to step back. I'm not saying, I actually do tell everyone, throw your phones out of the window. But I'm not saying, I mean, that's in a, but I'm saying that there are ways in which we can stop allowing it to control us. Today, the technology is controlling us. And they want it to go further. They say COVID has told us that we can do everything through technology. Don't have schools, have everything virtual, work from home. Because the easiest way to monitor a human being is if they are on, except when they have to write exams. So they are saying, okay, we'll bring in another technology which will be able to oversee you in your house. Not just what you show of yourself, but what they want to see of you. So, you know, the people who keep, for instance, Alexa in their houses. I don't get it. Are we not thinking, have we forgotten? Oh, it will tell me when to have my chai. Really? So I think the other thing immediately that we need to know is that the Internet of Things. See, how many, you know, if any of you uses the Fitbit, for instance, there is an article that one of the bankers from Axis Bank had written in Seminar magazine some time ago to explain how banking is changing and how it's so forward looking. And that very soon, all these things, you know, these artifacts, like things like the Fitbit, will be feeding into the information in the bank, because they will have when you go to sleep, whether you sleep well or not, whether it's disturbed or not, because that will tell them whether you're going to be healthy or not. And then they will share that information with the insurance company. And then they say, why do you want privacy on this? If you know, is it that you want to hide something from us? And then we have been made to feel that we can't say, yes, I want to hide something from you. I'm old and brazen, so I say, of course I do. I don't want you to know anything about me. But it's like you're committing a crime by saying you don't want to be surveilled. So we need to, we have to address this at multiple levels, because our consciousness is being attacked in multiple ways. If we know, we can start dealing with it. If we don't know, we'll just become objects of that exercise. If nobody if there's no question, I have a couple more things. It never ends. There is so much, you know, to. Can I just say, yeah, please, yeah.
Ma'am, Mani McCallier ma'am is saying she has a question.
Yes, please.
Please do unmute yourself, ma'am.
Mani McCallier, can you show your face also? Put the camera on. Unmute. I can't hear your voice. You have to unmute.
Yeah, please help. You can hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Usha. It's a wonderful exposition on the kind of determination that the technology is really playing and controlling our lives. I just introduced myself that I'm Mani McCallier, and my student Myra is moderating today. So appreciation to her also. And on the issues very comprehensive, and many of us did not get that perspective to analyze the technological determinism in this way. So I really enjoyed and got the insights, a lot of insights. Only one angle in which I would like to just make an observation is like you were telling about the self-help group movement, wherein we were interpreting in a different perspective, like theory of asymmetry of information. George Stiglitz has brought in, and we used to say that because the formal credit needs symmetry of information, and therefore the people like women were not captured, wherein this informal credit could be captured because they have a lot of information. But you have brought in another dimension of the interpretation connecting to the technological determinism, and I could understand how even lending through groups is to understand that the payment will be proper and the corporates, the banks will be profiting. So that is what I would like to compliment. Like you have brought in different dimensions of interpretation, and we have to take it forward in the sense not from the perspective in which you have been doing for a long, but in a different perspective. So I really appreciate the kind of flow you have been brought into almost all facets of the technological determinism and how human lives are being controlled. I'm afraid the last point you are making, that you have to at least go back or step back from, but rather it is also a class question where the people who could afford are with 2-3 mobiles, 2-3 laptops, but there are people who are not even able to get one. So that in that way we have to appreciate people who are not able to access to it, and refrain from using that. So thank you once again for such a brilliant exposition. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Actually, this, the last part which you were saying about digital divide, which some people don't have, and therefore we must remember that it's true. So what the tech companies are saying is that it's a fascinating period when the tech companies have found that or tech controllers have found that the state makes for a very good customer. So if you look at all these technologies, the relationship between the state and the tech world is that the state becomes a customer and the state also becomes a facilitator. So the state will pass laws which will say we have to, or pass rules, will punish, will do all of that. The coercive element of the whole exercise is handed over to the state. And the companies are sitting there and saying that, you need to have more hardware, you need to have more software. When all this technology thing started, before then, all the economic stuff I used to read was only in the economics page of the mainstream newspaper. But after this started, I realized can't afford to do that. So now I read 2-3 pink papers, right? The economic papers. And you find that all of them are pushing, I think Business Standard has a slightly different, if you read Economic Times, for instance, which is basically an industry paper. And they are constantly having articles and op-eds and editorials which are saying that the state should step in and provide these tools to everybody. So it's not about, so who adjusts to what? Is the priority of people the food that they can get and the education that they can get? Or is it getting themselves a tablet and a mobile phone through which they may be able to get education? Otherwise, you can't get it. And everybody knows it's truncated education when you just have some class across something like this. They don't care, because this is the way it's fascinating. Every disaster for a people is an opportunity for somebody. When we read Gone with the Wind, you find that Rhett Butler, who's the big hero, and Clark Gable acting as Rhett Butler, became the big hero for all people in my generation. He made his money on running through the embargo. So the disaster of the civil war became money making for him. Today, we find that is the norm. So you have demonetization, and immediately you just go back and look at that period, and you'll find that they're all, Nilekani has interview after interview on cashless economy, cashless, paperless, presenceless, constantly, because it's a great opportunity. COVID comes in, they say, let's put the whole world on a database. It's demented, but it is the imagination of today. We have to produce the other imagination. We are actually choiceless on this. Also, I was thinking, that when we were, some of the, books that you read which give you that imagination, some of it we've heard about, everyone talks about, which is 1984, George Orwell's 1984, and the idea of the big brother who's watching. If you've seen Modern Times, you'll find Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times. There is one place where you'll find Charlie Chaplin he needs a break. He's just sitting there and doing that, turning the screw all the time. He needs a break, and the only break you can get is going to the loo, the washroom. So he goes to the washroom and he just relaxes a little bit and slouches. And then Big Brother comes on a screen there to say, get back to work, you can't be here. So the idea of being watched all the time as a dystopic exercise, as dystopic experience, is in this book. Today, it is the ordinary, regular thing. Every place you go, you have to register, you have to give, you're a documented person who has to keep marking your presence and saying, this is me and I'm here. Otherwise, you can't get any of that to which you're naturally entitled. And with these CCTVs and with facial recognition, it's also literally everywhere. If you think about this, Nilekani's other report and the kind of writing that he's done since has got implemented now, which is on toll collection.
Yes.
Now, what they've done is they said toll collection, how are you going to make it more, smoother, this, that. Then they have a thing where they brought in a rule saying that every car must have an RFID chip in it. Every car that's manufactured for the past 2 years has a radio frequency identification chip which is there in it. Now they're bringing in a rule saying that every person who is going to travel on the highway has to have the RFID chip attached to a money, whatever your account is, and that the money will only be deducted like that. Which means that every time you cross a toll, you're reporting to somebody that this is happening. And this is all coming from somebody like, Nilekani is not some, monster sitting up in the hills. He's a liberal, humble man, make a lot of money, but, charitable. So this is the other thing that I find, that the richest people, the 5 richest people and 5 richest companies out of the first 10 will invariably these days be, for the past 15 years, they've been the tech company people. At least 5, sometimes more. And they become the philanthropists. They say, what can be worked upon in philanthropy? So Nilekani will have a thing which says, what is that? What's it called? Some ED, whatever. Now that company their job is to make sure that in every school, children are using technology for their education. So everything, the state, what it funds, what philanthropy from these technology companies fund, these relationships, they are all becoming meshed. So anyway, to go back to the books, one is 1984. The other is Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. That's so true today. What does he say basically in that? What is the premise? That they will give you all these toys to play with. And then you'll be playing with it. So we will be sitting during COVID, people, migrants will be walking home. People will be having no food at all. There'll be no health, no facility, no nothing. We'll be watching Netflix. So we are diverted. This is our, so entertainment. So it doesn't have to be through oppression every time. It can be through other forms of diversion. And that's what Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is about. Then you have Jeremy Bentham's Panopticon. The idea that even when you're not being watched, you will think that you could be watched. And so you will conduct yourself accordingly. Then there is another book that came in 2010 by a person called Edwin Black. And it's called IBM and the Holocaust. The whole book is on the net, so you can, you don't have to go hunting for it anywhere. Now in IBM and the Holocaust, he actually found the question that you have, if you go to Auschwitz, you go to Dachau, you'll find that one of the fascinating things is how did they manage to keep, people were being brought in hordes. There were train loads of people who were being brought in. And then some were sent to the gas chambers, some were sent to the labor camps, some were sent, So this is how did they keep track of every person? How did they know who was who? How did they know somebody was 1/8 Jew? Where did they get that information from? And then you find he documents the whole thing on how IBM's Hollerith system, which is a punch card system, was used in the census, using census data of the, of 2-3 censuses. And where prior to that, it might have taken 7-8 years for them to finish the census calculation. With the Hollerith system, it was possible to do it really quickly. And it was possible to make all these linkages to see who all the ancestry, it's like a check on pedigree. And then it's not as if they just provided the equipment. They were there to help them upgrade it, to repair it, to change it, to adapt it. These are documented. So to think that tech companies are innocent, there is no innocence. Let's forget innocence and let's stop being innocent ourselves. We don't have a choice. So one last thing, which is that, on Jan Dhan Yojana, 3 things, JAM. I don't know, the honesty of that acronym, where they say that, we are all in a jam. J standing for Jan Dhan Yojana, A for Aadhaar, and M for mobile. Now, in 2010, Mr. Nilekani was giving interviews where he said that roti, kapda, or makan is all passe. Who's interested in those things now? What is important is bank account, Aadhaar, and mobile number. So 3 numbers: your bank account number, your UID number, and your mobile number. These are the 3 that are going to be critical for everyone will need it to be alive. Now, I realize that since I don't have a mobile phone, and if I were to go and enroll on the UID system, I'm now old. My fingerprints change every day and they are vanishing. So if my fingerprints change, my biometrics change, the only way that I can go and re-enroll those, to update my fingerprints or my iris or whatever, is for me to send a message to the UID AI through my registered phone. They will send an OTP to my registered phone, and then I use that OTP for re-enrollment. Because otherwise anyone can go and say, oh, my fingerprints are not working, this is my number, please change it. If I don't have a mobile phone, today I will suffer civil death. Because I will not be recognized, because if these 3 numbers are not joined, and all 3, even the bank account you may be able to do without. They can't, but we can. But if the mobile number and the UID number don't work together in tandem, then it is civil death. So it is a very different imagination. What is producing this? How do they view us as people? How do they, as women is one thing, as transgenders, they made a big deal of this, that this is the first database and the first kind of place where you have the 3rd gender being recognized. So it has a column for male, female, and transgender. And they said, see how progressive we are. So what do? You take all that identity and put it onto your database, and then use it in whatever way you want to make products. Who you sell it to, what you do with it is entirely your business. It's out of the control of all of us. My thing most of the time is, what does it matter to you whether I'm man or woman? What business is it of yours? I need to know who you are as the state. And remember this, that the moment it becomes a national information utility, that is, data goes out of the state and it goes into the hands of the corporate, it is no longer that corporate is a private entity. It's not amenable to RTI. We don't know what they are doing, but they know what we are doing. I'm sorry, I'm beginning to sound like one, but it is as bad as that. I don't want to. Yeah.
I just add one line, Usha. Actually, I was traveling and listening to your lecture, and I reached my native. You can see the background. I am very much in a village. It is nothing other than Edapadi. So the issue here is, I could listen to your lecture and I reached this place and people are greeting. I could not reply back because I am attending your lecture. So that is technology. So on the one hand, technology helps that even in the moment you could listen to, but at the same time, what is missing is that you are not getting the very people greeting you and responding to. So I'm going to, after this, I'm going to respond. So this is the final point that for today's technological determinism, how it is. So you can enjoy the greens here, the all paddy crops. I'm sitting there listening to.
Actually, this is a rule that we have. I have to say that it's easy for me because I don't have a phone, that the person in front of me comes first. So if I'm having a conversation with you, then, if somebody, actually not with you, if you were present, I mean, then you come first, and then whatever comes through the machine comes after. So Manimekle ma'am, if you feel that you should just, kind of give us the ignore, I'm fully with you on it. Because technology has become ubiquitous, no? So it doesn't allow us actually any space to be the kind of social beings that we used to be before. So one question which has not been asked, I'll answer. So do I think that technology is a villain? Do I think it's just all bad, evil, terrible, awful? So, and I have an answer. It may not be a very satisfactory answer, but it's still an answer. The way I see it is that 2-3 things have happened which makes a villain out of the way technology has developed. It's not about technology itself being a villain. So if you look, the first part of it, where the technology controllers want to control governmental processes and therefore the state, and is changing our relationship with the state, to that extent it is villainous. The second thing is that when Arab Spring happened, and it was actually a great moment for technology then, because people were able to get together and congregate because they had the facility of this, of both the phone and of social media. Social media was there in some form; it was there. So that idea that it's something that increases democracy was a brilliant moment, but unfortunately, it has just been a moment. And it's actually moved on from then into the state recognizing how much control they can exercise through that same means. So it has become villainous in that sense. And if tech companies are not going to work at privacy by design, then there's no reason for us to trust them at all. The third thing is that they are monopolizing. They're trying desperately, battling with each other to create monopolies, which are monopolies of our data. And they've not asked us, they've not told us what it means, but to an extent I can understand that, because I think even they know that they haven't yet fully imagined where they are going. They're experimenting, they're going on trying to figure out, can I do more of this, take a little more of that? How far can I push people? During the time that the UID case was on, the number of meetings that we had on privacy, which was called by Facebook and by Google, is not funny. Because they were worried that they were losing legitimacy. And the moment the case was over, it's all stopped. When the case was going on, the state had set up committees, had brought in experts, because they said, we need to answer the court. When the case got over, the committees were disbanded without doing anything about it. And they've carried on with increasing the number of places where the UID is being made mandatory. So the other thing that, therefore, what I realize is it is a monster at this stage. It is a villain because it is pushing the state to be lawless. And we are all stuck in that process. So the state has power and the state has lawlessness. Then where are we with that? So that's the reason I think that this imagination of technology does produce villainy. But there can be other imaginations of technology that don't have to lead to villainy. That is what we need to imagine and sell back to these people who are sitting here.
Thank you so much, ma'am. It was indeed enlightening session. I was having 2-3 questions for you, but as we are lacking short of time, so I cannot ask these questions.
I'm so sorry.
No, that's not issue.
Will you send me the questions anyway so that I can have a look at them? And
I can mail you, ma'am. I'll ask Roshan to your email ID, then I can mail you the questions.
Anybody having questions, please feel free to send.
Okay, sure. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your informative lecture. And it was a great time to have you. Now I will hand over session to Sarvana HRF to have a formal vote of thanks. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. On behalf of HRF, I would like to thank our speaker, Dr. Usha ma'am, for the wonderful speech. It was very useful and informative to all of the participants. And I would like to thank moderator from Bharathidasan University, Mahera Himam. Yeah, thank you, ma'am. And I would like to thank all the participants for joining over here, and hope this session is very useful and informative to all of you. And I'd like to thank sign language interpreters as well as translator for interpreter for interpreting the entire session very well. Finally, of course, I want to thank you all the co-organizers and our team. Today, the session is co-organized by Madras School of Social Work, Chennai, Banyan Academy of Leadership in Mental Health, Chennai, Tata Institute of Social Science, Mumbai, and Bharathidasan University, Trichy. So thank you all the co-organizers and thank you our team. Before I close the session, I would like to have a few announcements to share with all of you. The first announcement is all the sessions is being uploaded in our YouTube channel. You can refer our YouTube channel if any of your friends or colleagues or students want to watch the session. You can refer our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel name is Human Rights Advocacy and Research Foundation. I repeat, our channel name is Human Rights Advocacy and Research Foundation. You can see the chat box. You can get the link from over there. Okay, yeah. The next announcement is we will continue the session for another 5 days. So tomorrow the topic of the session is children at crossroads. So tomorrow the topic of the session is children at crossroads. The speaker is Ms. Kamal Gaur. She's a deputy director in education from Save the Children. So on behalf of HRF, I welcome you all for the tomorrow session also. So that's all for the day. Thank you everyone. Very happy to see you. Thank you.